Welcome to 805 Focus. I'm Dr. Cinder Sinclair with Nonprofit Connect, and we will be bringing you the latest on your favorite nonprofits. So get ready to be inspired. Our special guest today is Kerri Murray, and Kerri is president of ShelterBox USA. Welcome, Kerri.
Thank you so much for having us, Cinder.
Oh, gosh, I appreciate you taking the time. You are a busy girl. Gee whiz. Okay, so where shall we start with ShelterBox? Maybe we'll ask you to tell us about sort of the basic idea of it and what you do sort of as an umbrella, maybe?
So ShelterBox is a global humanitarian relief organization, and we focus on one of your basic needs. So what are our basic needs? So food, water, shelter. At ShelterBox, we focus on the provision of emergency shelter and basic supplies when you've lost everything. So a family's been displaced from their home. It could be a disaster. So it could be cyclone, hurricane, fire, tornado, tsunami, earthquake, or violent conflict. And at ShelterBox, we are really working to combat one of the biggest issues that's plaguing our world today, and that's global displacement. So there are more people displaced in the world than any time in recorded history. It's over 120 million.
Is that right?
Yes, and it's people who've been displaced by disaster, right? By conflict, violence, or by the impacts of climate, a changing climate. So at ShelterBox, we really focus on the provision of emergency shelter. So a lot of people are like, wait, what's a shelter box, right?
Yes.
And the premise is, what are the things that you need to sustain your life if you're forced to flee your home and you lose everything in an instant? And so the foundation of recovery when you've lost your home is having a roof over your head, right? And I think especially even here in our own community, many people know what it feels like to be evacuated, right?
Yes. Oh,
or
gosh.
even, worst case, to lose their home or a loved one, right? And so your life stops when you've lost your home or you've been evacuated. So in order to get back to work, kids to get back to school, you have to have a place to call home. So the emergency shelter is at the core of what we do, and what we've been doing for nearly 25 years is the provision of the shelter. Now, the other things that we do is to help you set up your household very quickly. So often people have lost power. We know what that feels like, right? So we provide not just the shelter, but solar lanterns, so waterproof solar lanterns. We provide water purification. Even here, we've seen contamination of the water source. So water filters, containers to store water. We also provide sleeping mats, sometimes sleeping bags. We provide cooking sets. So aid organizations might bring in food or water, but what are you going to boil water with? What are you going to prepare a hot meal with? Meals, massive sense of restoring routine and normalcy for a family. So these are some of the items, but you will think of it almost as a survival kit, right?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, a survival kit.
Yeah.
Is it typically an area where all the people have a similar experience, or is it one family at a time, or a little bit of both, or how does that usually work?
So 25 years ago when we first got started, and it was really because of a massive earthquake in India and Pakistan that hit, and we were providing a singular shelter box, right? A one-size-fits-all approach back then. Today, we don't do shelter boxes per se. We do customized shelter packages based on the unique needs of the displacement crisis. So very different needs in war in Ukraine with refugees fleeing Ukraine than actually people living in damaged homes or people that were displaced and maybe sleeping in train stations or churches or schools. So we really work to conduct assessments very quickly to meet the needs of the moment. And it's different in every disaster situation that we're going into. So it's all customized packages.
Gosh. So, I just have so many questions whirling around in my head trying to imagine. So do you have a lot of volunteers or a lot of people? I mean, you go all over the world, not just in this country.
Yeah, we do. So we actually, ShelterBox is known for working in the world's worst disaster and conflict zones. And so we are working in war zones like Gaza. We're working in Ukraine. Our longest piece of our work has been in Syria, over 12 years to the crisis there. And then we're working all across the world. Right now, we're working in Pakistan for extraordinary flooding there. We're working in places like Cameroon, in refugee camps, and in the Sahel of Africa. We're starting a project in Sudan.
I was going to ask you about
Yes.
Sudan.
Yes, so massive, massive crisis there. We've been working in Chad for the past year, helping with the Sudanese refugees fleeing in, but now we're starting a project in Sudan. Also, we've just started a project in Lebanon because of the displacement there. So all over the world, all different types of crisis situations that people are finding themselves in.
So do you have a lot of volunteers, a big
Oh,
staff,
yes.
a combination?
So-
How does that work?
I think the incredible thing about ShelterBox is when we were founded back in the year 2000, we were founded on the backbones of volunteers. That includes a really strong connection with a volunteer service organization called Rotary International.
Oh.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we were founded by Rotarians. And
didn't know
yes,
that.
and their goal was to help a few dozen families a year. Fast forward to today, we're helping hundreds of thousands of people every single year, and we remain the official project partner of Rotary in emergencies. So what does that mean? Well, Rotary is in over 100 countries.
Yeah.
And what that means is on the ground when disasters happen, often the first sources of information are coming from Rotary Club members and districts within those regions. So they're great sources of volunteerism in terms of information, helping us with logistics and supply chain, sometimes translators, connecting us to those local communities. So we work with large organizations like Rotary. We also have partners like Habitat for Humanity. But we also have an incredible base of volunteers globally called the ShelterBox Response Team, the SRT. They are some of the most highly trained response teams in the world. They serve as volunteers. They train continuously with the organization. And when you apply to become a response team member, you go through about a year of training. 1 in 30 people will pass the program. Yes, and become a response team member. And these folks deploy in teams to disaster situations all over the world, but they are the force multiplier in our work because we have these folks across the world ready to be boots on the ground when disasters happen. And they could deploy at any phase of the response, from the initial assessment phase when we're just going in and really gathering caseloads and who's been affected, how many people, what are the needs. But they also are working to build local capacity. So they're training communities on emergency shelter, how to build and construct their shelters. They're also working to do monitoring and evaluation and learning. So as a learning organization, we continually improve. So they are an incredible base of volunteers. We also have an incredible program in the U.S. called our Ambassador Program. Yes, and we are always looking for more ambassadors at ShelterBox. And these are our local boots on the ground that really help raise visibility and serve in a capacity to raise awareness locally of our work.
Like what? Like, give me an example of what they do.
So, for instance, we have volunteers. We have some here in Santa Barbara. And, when something happens, a major disaster happens. We just had recently, it could be Hurricane Helene. It could be Hurricane Milton, right? And oftentimes we'll get calls to say, can you come update us on what you're doing? So they might bring the tent, they'll bring the supplies, they'll go to schools and help educate students. They might go to a food and wine festival or a church or a group, and they help to raise awareness of what the displacement crisis is and also what we're doing, right? So they help raise awareness of these vexing issues around the world that are facing our world and that we're working to address.
Yeah. So you say 1 in 30 pass the
Yes.
the training. What are some of the sort of stumbling blocks that are common?
I would say, especially disaster relief, it can attract a lot of very type A people, right?
Yeah,
Go.
right.
And in order for us to do this work, we have to work as a team, right? And that we all serve and fit different roles, but we have to work really well together, right? And so I would say it's folks who have a high degree of emotional intelligence, right? Oftentimes people have special language skills, or they've got special skills in, say, logistics or supply chain. They might have special shelter expertise, right? And so we build and construct the response team to be very complementary to that response
Okay.
and the needs of that response.
Yeah. So I like it that you spend so much time training the volunteers. So a person could go on your website and find out, what volunteers are needed
Yes.
and how they
So
sign up.
we have a lot of volunteer opportunities from the ShelterBox response team, ShelterBox ambassadors. We also have an incredible program called the ShelterBox Adventurers. Yes. So ShelterBox Adventurers are volunteers who want to often combine their passion for the outdoors and for activity with their passion for making a difference. So they could be, so we've had people that run marathons with the ShelterBox on their back. Yes, we've had people climbing and hiking Yosemite. Yes. And so we've had people do runs to cycle across the United States, all different things to help raise awareness of the organization. And what we need is private charitable support, the
Right.
funds to do
Yeah.
the work.
And
This is
so-
only possible because of that. So
Right.
I believe that everybody has the ability to make a difference, right?
Yes.
Everyone can do something, right? Whether it's your time, your talent, your treasures, everyone can do something.
Yeah. This is just, I can see a lot of people wanting to come and sign up for this.
Hope.
How many, just off the top of your head, how many volunteers do you think you have out there?
Oh, across the world, thousands.
Thousands, I would imagine.
Yes.
Thousands upon
and
thousands.
hundreds in the United States.
Wow.
And we need it.
So, ShelterBox, 501c3, nonprofit.
Yes.
I bet you have a donate now button on your website.
We do.
And so a person can go there and make a charitable donation.
They can. And our organization is a model of pre-positioning, that we have to be ready to go. We have to have volunteers trained. We have to have supplies ready.
You never know when this.
We don't. It's not if, it's when, right? And it's been when a lot lately,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we have to have our solar lanterns ready, our cooking sets, our tents, our tarpaulin sets, sleeping bags, blankets. We're approaching winter in a lot of the areas we're working. So just high thermal gear, so clothing and blankets. So we also have an opportunity on the website to make a donation to what we call Stock the Box, right? So
okay.
make a contribution for one of the items
That's
that
good.
we're gonna be deploying around the world.
So do you have a big warehouse or something where you keep all
Yes.
these things?
So we have warehouses in order for us to do our work effectively and be fast and efficient, right? It wouldn't make sense for us to have one warehouse here in Santa Barbara. We have warehouses across the world we work at the International Humanitarian Depot in Dubai. So we have aid stored there that we're constantly cycling through. We have a warehouse in Cebu, Philippines, because Philippines is an island nation endemic to disasters. We can move really fast if we have at any time 8,000 households worth of shelter kit ready to go. We also have a warehouse in Panama that we're also pre-positioning aid. So across the world, we pre-position what we're likely to need in those regions, and we draw down on those material aid in those regions.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
And then
am
oftentimes, Sandra, the movement in our industry, right, in this sector, is also towards localization, right? So
of
how
course,
can
of
we
course.
how can we not always send planes? Sometimes you need to. If it's just something really catastrophic, you're gonna like Turkey, Syria earthquakes last year, right? We're gonna be loading and doing an airlift. We had to, right, to save lives. But oftentimes, if we can procure locally those items, right, that are plentiful, we can stimulate the local economy.
Yes.
We're not moving things around the world. We're reducing our footprint. So there's definitely a movement in terms of helping communities recover with things that we can source locally. So we're doing that right now in Pakistan. We're doing it in Bangladesh, sourcing things like bamboo, corrugated iron. Yeah.
So, okay. Now you're getting ready to go on a trip just right around the corner.
Yes, I am. So yes, I'm taking off soon. I am going to work in Western North Carolina. So obviously the area around Asheville, it was hit so hard, many counties there, by Hurricane Helene, right? Hundreds of roads washed out, Yes, thousands of people displaced, people still missing, right? And an area that's not accustomed, right, to having devastating
Right.
hurricanes, right? So we've been working with our Rotary partners in what's called it's Rotary Zone 33, 34. It covers Florida to the Carolinas. And we've been working with the county EOCs, the emergency operating centers, to do needs assessments on what do people need, right? Here in our own country, right? And a lot of people initially even sheltering outside, and they were completely cut off. So our partners doing helo lifts into these communities. But things like we're doing 0-degree sleeping bags, we're doing camp stoves, comforters and blankets, solar lanterns, even our tents. So to use in a shelter setting. So we have an aid package, and we've been working with our Rotary partners, and I'll be with the Rotary International President next week in North Carolina, helping with
I am
those.
so glad to know about.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I mean, I knew that you worked with Rotary,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize that they founded it.
Yes,
and
they
that you work with them so extensively. That is just
You want to get something done, you ask a bunch of busy Rotarians, right? They're
Yeah.
amazing. They're just amazing. Yeah, and they've helped us all across the world in our responses.
so. We have a few minutes left. What extra information would you like people to know about ShelterBox? And maybe you want to tell a story that illustrates your work.
Yeah, I would say, Cinder, what compels me to this work is that we focus on the most vulnerable people in the world, on the planet, right? Lots of times we're working in places a lot of people haven't heard of, right? And we're going the last mile to reach people. And those that suffer disproportionately are often women, right? Women and children. So women having higher death rates in disaster situations, also more likely to be economically disadvantaged and out of work because they're caring for family, right, an extended family. Oftentimes more likely to experience gender-based violence. We know that sexual violence, right? More likely to be out of school. I've seen it firsthand over and over again. And so at ShelterBox, we prioritize the most vulnerable, and those are often women. But women are absolutely at the core of community recovery. And I see it in every emergency, right? They are at the core. And so a big part of our work is helping women and empower women with the tools and resources that they can help themselves in their communities. I was just returning from Grenada. I was working on the island of Kerri. So many people didn't see this because they didn't really see it on the news. But the strongest storm ever to form this early in the season in the Atlantic was Hurricane Beryl. It formed in June, Category 5 storm.
Oh,
and it hit July 1st in the islands in Grenada, and particularly on Kerri as well as Petite Martinique. 95% of the structures were damaged or destroyed. And so we brought and helped thousands of people with emergency shelter and vital supplies. And I met this one woman, Lucy, who was in her 60s. She's a grandmother and caring for her disabled son. And she was not able to flee to a shelter, even though a Cat 5 storm was approaching, because of his disabilities. So she hid in the bathroom, and there was a concrete cement area around her. It's the only reason it saved her life. She covered her son with her body.
Oh gosh!
And when they came out from the bathroom, everything was gone, but they survived. And so for someone like Lucy, we provided a ShelterBox tent and an aid package, solar lights, kitchen sets. I have never seen a tent like this before. I've seen thousands of our tents, but she took so much pride in setting up her tent for her and her son, and it made the absolute difference in her being able to recover. She built gardens around her tent. She sewed curtains. She made rooms.
My gosh.
She put a toilet room in the tent, a kitchen area, and she made the most dignified and incredible just living space for her and her son. And she said to me, I can't believe you helped me. There's so many people that are worse off, but I'm so grateful for the support. And I want you to know how much this tent means to me and that you enabled us to have a place to call home and start our life again, right? And it's just the most basic, right, and rudimentary things that are so vital when you've lost everything. And she, that's always a heavy weight on me when someone says, thank you so much. Because it's really, we're a nonprofit and it's the supporters
Yeah.
that make the life-saving work possible. But in seemingly, sometimes I feel like the worst of times, you often see the best of humanity.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah, and people coming together. And that's what, we do is bring people hope as well, right?
Yes, bringing hope. I can see that. Oh, Kerri, thank you so much for all that you do.
Of course, thank you.
And thanks to your team and all over the world. And thanks for coming on our show to tell
course.
our folks all about it.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Cinder.
And thank you for joining us on 805 Focus, and we'll see you next time.